Let's have a little discussion about overtime pay. State of California. State of California has some complicated overtime laws. I've got one of the only applications, like you search this on YouTube, you look for California overtime law demonstration. It's so tough that there's not a lot of things to choose from. And it's because it's really difficult. I've programmed an Excel file to do this though. And I've had a handful of people use this, and also people use it for legal purposes of like presenting what a payment should have been, because you need a model to model the payroll, historical payroll, to figure out what things should have been in a lot of instances. And so this thing, it's pretty good. It's got a lot of capabilities to it. I'm just going to run through basically what it does. You have an employee, you put the name in. I added Ken Braverman. I was trying out a video a few minutes ago, and I got some data in here, and I'm going to show you what I did. So Ken Braverman, you put in any information here you need. That allows you to choose the name from the drop-down menu now. So you could put somebody else's name in here, and then you're going to be able to choose them as somebody who's working. You put the day they worked. You can put a clock in or clock out if you want. You got to type it in like a time though. So you got to use the colon, what time are you in? It's going to default to PM. You can put in military time, you leave this time, 6:25 PM. It's going to automatically calculate hours, and it's going to automatically calculate overtime hours. And it's going to it's going to do that using the daily and the weekly method appropriately, and applying the hours each day into their correct classification, and then summing them all up and allow you to refresh and browse in the pivot table to see each week how many hours were actually worked and then how those hours got allocated. So in this week of 2/27, February 27th, I worked apparently 77 hours, and 40 of them are regular, which makes sense in a 40-hour work week. 40 hours are regular, and then other hours that were overtime ended up being 37 overtime and 3 double time, because there's other formulas about when double time hours apply. And this is your total hour distribution for the pay period, what it should have been. There's a 99% chance that the employer that would deal with an employee who worked 11 hours on every day to appropriately comply with California's overtime laws. I would bet you that less than half of businesses, and probably less than 25% of the businesses, actually account for this overtime properly and would have this distributed out as 37 hours of overtime and 3 hours of double time. I bet you even less than 20%, because it's so complicated about where these hours go on any given day. And there's other things like breaks and different types of hours. If somebody works vacation instead of a regular hour during a period, like if the clock in and clock out is just a symbolic clock in and they're really doing vacation hours, that affects overtime differently because it's not included in their weekly total, because it's not actual hours worked. There's a lot of mechanics going on with all of these formulas over here. It's why there's so many of them. Look at this. Look at this nonsense. There's a good deal of columns there. Talking about 26 columns worth of data to try to break this out. And this file only works if you have the employee. It has to be the same employee. I think the same employee. Might not actually have to be the same employee. I think it has to be in chronological order, meaning every time you put a day in here, it's got to be later as it goes down. You can't start to work on January here. Like, this will not work. 1/1/2002, whatever. This date is before other dates that are above it, and that will not work properly. So every date has to be in chronological order is the condition of when you use this. But it does look like it works with multiple employees. I'm pretty sure I built it to do that. I think so. If not, as we test it, we'll go. But it definitely works for one employee, that's for sure. And one employee's data is a mass of data to work with. It's so complicated. Got to have all those hours broken out by day and classified in order to get it to work. But when you do, you've got a pivot table that is fully dynamic that allows you to compare this to whatever records, payroll records you actually have from the business, which is information that comes into the file somewhere else. And then you write formulas to compare the two data sets to figure out what the employee may be owed if they are owed any additional overtime due to the way the calculation should have been done. And this is how you summarize all that. So it's a powerful tool for a really specific yet widely, it is essentially an untapped resource, I believe, for disgruntled employees. Because if you worked a lot of overtime, the odds that your business did it wrong and underpaid you are quite large. Like the probability that they did it wrong is they probably did it wrong. If you had to choose probably or probably not, they probably didn't pay you enough. And you'll see that because of the fact that you do get credit if you work more than 8 hours in a day, but you also get credit if you work more than 40 hours in a week. And you got to account for both of those. It'll result in more overtime for you on the weekends, even if you don't work more than an 8-hour day on the weekends. That's one thing that'll help with that. And if you worked any day hours more than 8 in a day, even like an hour or so, you'll get credit for that overtime during the week when normally you wouldn't if you were like on salary, non-exempt employee or something like that. So that's what it does. There's places to change the date so you get the date set up, and then there's ways to change the pay period so that the pay period alignment is aligned with whatever business you're running against. If they paid semi-monthly or bi-weekly or monthly, something different. That's even more complicated, but it's very doable in this file because we just adjust the way this works. And the formulas are smart enough to understand the pay period and to group things appropriately by week and also by pay period so that you get the overtime calculations in there correctly. It's a powerful, smart tool. There's so many things going on inside of it that I understand why I'm one of the rare people who has written a program in Excel to tackle this that I believe works properly. And so far, the state of California has believed it's working properly enough that it is used as a basis for helping to calculate this. So that's a overtime video. Like I said, untapped resource. If you worked a lot of overtime in California and you don't like your employer or former employer, and you have your timesheet data, you could throw it in here and figure out what you were supposed to be paid. There's a way to put rates in here. What is this? Total paid. Yeah, there's a way to put rates in here. I don't have it listed, but I think that this total paid amount involves the rate. So if you know that this sample names person gets paid $20 an hour, you're going to multiply it by the number of hours that are chosen, which exists somewhere. It's so complicated. I haven't even done this. Yeah, I do it on a one-off basis when you purchase this, even though I don't actually list this on my website to purchase because it's such a specific thing where people just contact me and I talk to them about it. But it can work with whatever your situation is, and it can show gross compensation as this one used to before I broke all the formulas. And it will show gross compensation for the example you need when you need to have gross compensation listed, and we'll just add a formula to do it. All right, that's a short video, gone a little long. Payroll should be easy. We're doing the best to make it so in California, and I believe British Columbia, another place where they have crazy overtime laws that mimic California, that are very worker empowered. You probably have some old overtime money due to you if you really dug and looked for it. That's all I have to say about California overtime laws. If you don't work much like me and haven't been on W-2 this decade, then it's not an issue. But if you're working somewhere where they're paying you hourly, there are laws that employees in the state of California, employers need to follow. And while they are difficult to enforce sometimes because they are extremely complicated, this is a way to figure out what it should have been. So That's why I have it ready and available for you. So payroll should be easy. We are doing the best to make it so, even in these difficult circumstances of something that is not easy in calculating overtime in California.